Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Ka. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program where we study the first book of this book series titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. The title of the book is Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment, Volume 1. In this book, each Sunday, I'm going chapter by chapter to help you guys understand the teachings and help you develop your life practice. If you've been reading the book and attending classes, then you're starting to maybe understand more and more about this path to enlightenment and maybe starting to implement it and starting to even see some results. Because we're a good 4 months into the program at this point. We started back in January, and now you've been learning quite a bit as we've gone through the entire program. Today's chapter is chapter 11, which is titled Meditation, Developing Your Practice. I'm going to be teaching you the ins and outs of meditation as part of developing your life practice. And I even started this at the beginning of the program where we did a 4-part series on breathing mindfulness meditation and a 4-part series on loving kindness meditation. But in those particular sessions, which were on Wednesday, I was really giving you kind of an encapsulated version and helping you to really develop your practice, helping you to understand a bit about the practice of breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation, and then helping you get started to actually do the meditation so that you could get those underway. But now, today, we're going to go through all the ins and outs of meditation. We're going to be discussing not only breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation, but also 2 specialized meditations, one to help eliminate sexual cravings and one to help you realize non-self. So if you have been developing your meditation practice and you have questions and you need clarity and to understand, this is the perfect class for you to be able to build up your meditation practice. And because you've actually been learning some of the other teachings on the path to enlightenment, now I can show you more directly the connections between meditation and the teachings that you've been learning. Because when I did those 4-part series on breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation, we hadn't yet shared things like the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the 3 Poisons and all the other teachings that you've been learning as part of this journey to enlightenment. So now I can start connecting all of this for you, giving you an opportunity to open up to any and all questions that you might be interested to ask, to clarify, so that you can really strengthen your meditation practice, because this is a significant part of developing your practice. So I'd like to welcome all of you to today's class and invite you to ask any and all questions as we go through the class. I'm going to be using some visual aids here to help me to share and communicate this content with you so that you can learn and, like I mentioned, ask any and all questions that you might have as we go into today's class. I'll pause at different times and you can ask those questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, putting that into the comment section. Our moderator will see that. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. In order to teach you about meditation, what I need to do is give you some basics. And one of the basic things to understand is just getting a definition of what meditation is. I commonly do this as I go through this book series, is where there's a certain topic that is the first time that I've really talked about it in depth, I will define it for you. Because of impermanence, different people think about things in different ways, and different topics are discussed in different ways. So that you can understand the way that I'm talking about a particular topic, I will tend to define define what that is before even getting really started in the chapter. So on the very first page of this chapter, I share a definition of what meditation is, and also I share what meditation isn't. So that's how I'm going to start this class as well, is defining what meditation is so that you know very clearly what it is that I'm talking about when I share the word meditation. Meditation is a technique to actively train the mind during dedicated, independent, purposeful training sessions to eliminate unwholesome qualities of the mind and or cultivate wholesome qualities of the mind in the positions of seated, lying, standing, or walking. So you're actively working to train the mind in meditation, and you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities. And when I introduce you to the 4 different meditations today, I'm going to be sharing with you very clearly, this is what you're eliminating and this is what you're cultivating. This gives you the why behind your meditation. And if you studied the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires, you have a little bit of understanding of how we use meditation and why we use it based on those poisons that are in the unenlightened mind, or those pollutions or taints or defilements. So the meditations are used in order to actively train the mind and uproot various pollutions that are in the mind. It's this dedicated, independent, purposeful training session where you're actively training the mind to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities and cultivate certain wholesome qualities. And you're going to be using the seated, lying, standing, or walking positions. These are the 4 positions that the Buddha shared, because it's not possible for your body to be permanently in the same position to meditate throughout your life. You're going to need these different positions at different times, and I'm going to share with you how you might decide to employ these different positions. Just as important as it is to explain and share what meditation is, it's also important to share what meditation isn't. Because nowadays with common language, we tend to say things that might not necessarily be exactly the way that the Buddha shared it. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, he used meditation as this dedicated, active, purposeful training session. But nowadays, sometimes somebody might say, I'm going to go exercise and meditate, or I'm going to go walk the dog and meditate, or I'm going to go gardening or driving and meditate. Well, these activities and others are really helpful for your life and you might enjoy them, but they're not meditation. If you thought that exercising, walking the dog, gardening, or driving, or other things like this was actual meditation, but you never did what it is that I'm going to share with you in today's class, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment through just exercising or walking the dog or gardening or driving. You're going to need this dedicated, active, purposeful training session, eliminating certain unwholesome qualities and arising certain wholesome qualities. So be sure that you're very clear about what meditation is and what it isn't. And while you may decide to exercise, walk your dog, garden, drive, maybe do martial arts, some people might like crocheting or knitting or other things like this. There's all kinds of hobbies out there that you might decide to get involved in. But remember, those things are hobbies. They're not actual meditation. And as you're learning meditation, it's very helpful and very important to have a meditation teacher, because a teacher is going to be able to help guide you in your practice and help you to understand how to meditate and what you're experiencing as you meditate. Because as you're gradually awakening the mind, you're going to experience different things that are occurring, and you're going to need to reach out to somebody and ask for help. Nowadays, with things like YouTube and podcasts and books and things like this, all too often people think that they can actually get to enlightenment on their own without any help of any teachers or any guides, but this isn't actual possible. There's only one type of unique individual that can get to enlightenment on their own without the help of any teachers or guides, and that would be an actual Buddha. A Buddha awakens to enlightenment on their own without the help of any teachers or any guides. Then they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing those teachings that they discovered through their independent journey, and countless more people get to enlightenment during their lifetime. And then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people can get to enlightenment after their death. The last known Buddha that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. So you're going to need teachers and guides to help you along the way. There have been some students that have contacted me over the years that were trying to get to enlightenment on their own, and they worked themselves into a very difficult situation to the point where they were suicidal, having suicidal thoughts. They were highly depressed. They were sleeping, 20, 23 hours a day. This one person that I'm thinking talking about he was a doctor, or he is a doctor, and he got to the point where he couldn't even work anymore. He couldn't go to work, and his life had become quite miserable. And for one reason or another, he found me, he reached out to me, he even came here to Thailand for a period of time to learn, and I helped him over the years, and gradually, slowly but surely, he's gotten back into work. He doesn't have suicidal thoughts anymore. He doesn't have the depression anymore. His life is completely changed and evolved, and he realizes what he was doing was he was watching YouTube videos and reading books and trying to get to enlightenment on his own, but this isn't possible for just the average person. Only a Buddha would be able to do that. So you're going to need somebody to reach out to, even if it's once every 3 months, once every 6 months, no particular schedule. But if you're having complications or you're having certain things happen in your meditation practice that you're not sure of, you would like to reach out to somebody and say, hey, I'm experiencing this. Is this something that's common? Is this normal? Is there something I'm doing wrong? And if what you get back from me is that's completely normal, keep going and you're on the right track, and that's an indication that things are moving in the right direction, you'll have that confidence and you'll have the ability to know that, yes, you're headed in the right direction. Whereas if you don't have that guidance, the mind can kind of get twisted up on itself that you don't have somebody to reach out to get help. So if you would like to reach out to me, or if you have another person in your life or in your mind, teachers that you can reach out to get help with the development of your meditation practice, that's very important to have a teacher that you can reach out to and get help, whether it's in these classes, in the Facebook group, sending private messages, or personal guidance. You're going to need that along your journey to be able to confirm that things that are happening are normal, or to increase your practice and develop certain aspects of your practice. You're going to need that interaction from a teacher. There's these 4 positions that were shared by the Buddha for meditating. And I will share these 4 positions with you: the seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. I'll share with you how I use these different positions and how I notice that they're beneficial for me. But as you have been learning with me, I teach brand new students from the very beginning, don't believe anything that I share, that you learn, you reflect, and you practice and see the truth for yourself. So I'll share these 4 positions with you and help you understand how I use them, but then you'll need to use them and see what works best for you in certain situations so that you'll know the truth for yourself of what works best. The seated position is the one that is used most often, where you're usually sitting on the floor with maybe a cushion under your rear. You have your legs lightly crossed and your hands resting in your lap and your upper body erect. You can also do this from a chair. You can do this from a wheelchair. You can do it on a bench or a sofa or something like that as well. You would like your lower body and the hands and arms completely relaxed with the upper body erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation so that you can do that active, dedicated training in order to eliminate unwholesome qualities and cultivate wholesome qualities. So the seated position tends to be the go-to position that a lot of people use because it's easy to use and you can do it anywhere essentially. But sometimes in the seated position, you might experience pain, like your hips might be painful, your knees, your ankles. You might feel pain in the back at some point. And if any time you feel pain, you would like to change your position. You're not interested in just experiencing the pain, because while the mind's experiencing that pain, it can't eliminate certain unwholesome qualities and cultivate wholesome qualities because it's just feeling pain consistently. So that's where you might decide to shift or just start out your meditation practice in the lying position. The lying position is where you're lying on your back, face up, and you might have your arms out to the side with the palms up or palms down. It's really up to you. If you've ever done yoga, I think they call this resting pose or shavasana pose. This is where all the muscles in the body are completely relaxed. So it's really helpful, like I mentioned, if you're feeling any pain in any part of your body. But one of the challenges with lying position is that the mind can have a tendency to become drowsy or fall asleep. So you need to be attentive and alert to that the lying position, if you're trying to get some training in, if you're noticing you're dozing off, you might decide to use one of these other positions. Like standing position is really helpful if you're noticing that you're dozing off and becoming sleepy. And all you do is you stand up with your feet together and you put your hands either in front of you, clasping the wrist of one hand with the other, or you can put your hands along the side of your body, or you can put them behind you and clasp the wrist behind you. So this is the standing position, and you would just close the eyes, and with these 3 positions, you're doing the same thing with the mind. It's just that the body positioning has changed, but you're doing exactly the same thing with the mind. With breathing mindfulness meditation, you're focused on the breath. With loving kindness meditation, you're doing those affirmations. So you can do these in the seated, lying, or standing positions. And you can also use standing position if you're noticing that there's pain in the body too. You can go from a seated position to a standing, or you could just start with a standing position if you like. And then there's walking position. This one is also really good if you're noticing pain in the body that you might decide to walk. Or the other situation is if the last thing you're thinking about is being still in a seated position and your mind just can't fathom being still for an extended period of time, and putting some movement into the body can help you get into a meditation, then the walking position is really good for that. It's also really good if you're noticing an overactive mind, or if you have anxiety in the mind and the mind's just excited or overactive. You can calm the mind down by doing some walking meditation. Walking meditation is a challenge to be able to teach in an online class like this, so I've never taught it in an online class. But I did do a video about it and put it on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in learning how to do walking meditation, you could go to the YouTube channel and search for walking meditation, and it should pop up as the first video. And there you can see how I teach walking meditation, because you'll need this most likely at different times in your practice. Just like all these other positions, you're going to need those at different times. There was a situation in 2019 where I got into a motorbike accident, and I was lying in a hospital bed with an IV hooked up to me, and I couldn't cross my legs to do seated meditation. But because I knew lying position and I had used it before, I was able to still continue to meditate. So you would like to employ these different positions at different times so that your mind doesn't get fixed to meditating in one particular position, because that's what the unenlightened mind is going to have a tendency to do, is it's going to crave permanence. So if you've been meditating for an extended period of time, for several months, maybe in the seated position, you might decide to start introducing some impermanence into your meditation practice, where you might try to do lying meditation for a few weeks, or you might try standing meditation for a few weeks. You might try walking meditation for a few weeks. Kind of challenge the mind and test it in these other positions and develop them and see in what situations they work best. Because you're not going to always be interested in meditating in the seated position, because that would be permanence, and we understand the universal truth of impermanence. So you can employ these different positions and see which position works best for you in any given situation. I'm going to pause here with these basic teachings about meditation and see what questions you guys have before I move on to the next set of things that I'm going to share with you. If you have questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly.
There are currently no questions, sir.
Okay, so let's move on to the next thing, which is helping you to understand how to start your meditation practice and how to conduct your meditation practice. The first thing to understand as you're starting to learn meditation and develop your practice is understand that the mind is the boss and the body is the employee. You're going to need to go through the body in order to get to the employee, right? You're going to need to go through the body in order to get to the mind. So you're going to need to go through this employee of the body in order to get to the boss. So if the employee is painful and feeling pain, the employee is not going to want to take you to go see the boss. Or if the employee is too luxurious, it's not going to want to take you to go see the boss. So what you're looking for in starting your meditation is you're looking to start in a body position where there's comfort, not pain and not luxurious condition of the body, because if there's pain, again, the mind's not going to be interested to be trained. But if the body is too luxurious, it tends to be complacent. So you would like the employee to be comfortable so that it'll take you to go see the boss. So by going through this body, you can then get to the mind. The next thing is that as you learn with the words of the Buddha and you see what he taught about meditation, he regularly talked about setting up mindfulness in front of you before you start meditating. And if you can remember what I shared with you about mindfulness, I talked about awareness of mind and having awareness of the mind. That's essentially the very beginning part of understanding mindfulness. And then it goes deeper into the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where we talked about the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. So setting up mindfulness in front of you is to bring some awareness to the mind before you go into meditation. That you're not interested in just plopping down into meditation and starting to meditate, because the mind's going to probably want to fight you, or it's going to want to run away from you. It's not going to be interested to sit there and train, because the mind is like an untamed animal, like this wild animal in the unenlightened state. And when it's time to meditate, your mind is either going to want to fight you and be like, no, I don't want to meditate, or it's going to want to run away. It's going to want to go do like play on social media or watch some movie or something else. It's not going to be interested in doing the actual training. So what the Buddha teaches is to set up mindfulness in front of you, set up this awareness of mind. And how each person chooses to do that is going to be unique to you. But what you might decide to do is go to the bathroom, empty out the organs. You might come, do a little bit of stretching perhaps, get the body situated in a position. And one of the things that I do is I use chanting to ease the mind into meditation, building that awareness of mind. And this is why I did a 4-part series on Buddhist chanting. So if you would like to learn Buddhist chanting, there's nothing mystical or magical about this. It's not prayer, it's not worship, it's not a rite or ritual. The Buddha used chanting during his lifetime in order to help his students commit his teachings to memory, because nothing was written down during his lifetime. So about once every 2 weeks, people would come together that were learning with the Buddha, and they would chant his teachings word for word for word. So 26 times a year, people were chanting in order to commit his teachings to memory. And today we still do chanting, but we have books and videos and podcasts and things like that to capture the teachings. So I use chanting as a way to ease the mind into meditation, gaining this awareness of the mind and awareness of the breath. So you could practice that if you'd like, but you're not required to. There's other ways to cultivate awareness of mind before you go into meditation. So whatever you choose to do, be sure that you're not just plopping down into meditation, because the mind typically doesn't like that drastic change. You would like to gradually ease the mind into meditation by developing some awareness of mind, or set up mindfulness in front of you. In terms of a time, frequency, or schedule of meditation, what you would like to ultimately build up to is 2 to 3 meditation sessions for 30 minutes or more. But this will typically take you some time to build up to that. You typically aren't starting out that way. You need to create some space in your life. You need to build the tendency to choose to meditate. You need to build the ability for the mind to stay in meditation for that period of time. So you might start with just once or twice, 5, 10, 15 minutes a day or something like that. You don't need to actually time your meditations with an alarm, but you would like to keep track of how long you've been meditating occasionally. If you set an alarm for your meditation, you'll either be in meditation and kind of longing and yearning, is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? Or you'll be deep in meditation getting all kinds of benefit, and then the alarm will go off when you could have actually gotten more benefit if you wouldn't have set the alarm. When you're in situations where you have to set an alarm, like before going to work or something like that, go ahead and set the alarm, because you only have a certain amount of time. And if you went too long, then you would probably be late and have some challenges at work. But maybe in the evenings or on the weekends where you don't need an alarm, don't use an alarm. Just go into meditation, meditate for whatever period of time that you have, and then when you're done, come out of meditation. And if you're looking to figure out how long you've been meditating, about once a week, look at your clock before going into meditation. Maybe it's 10 a.m. And now you meditate, and when you're done, you look at the clock, and maybe it's 10:15 or 10:30 or 10:45, and you can do the math and figure out how long you meditated for. And what you should see over the course of weeks and months is this gradual expanding of your meditation practice. You would like to see that there's gradual increase in the amount of time that you're able to meditate. And that's how you can do that, is just by once a week checking in on the amount of time that you've been meditating. Because if you set that alarm, you're going to notice that your mind's going to probably be longing and yearning to figure out if it's time yet, or you'll be deep in meditation getting benefits and the alarm will go off. So as you're meditating, you don't have to have this set amount of time every single time you meditate. And you don't need to have a set schedule where maybe some people might decide that they would like to meditate every day at 8 a.m. or every day at 6 p.m. This is actually not possible. You're setting yourself up to fail. Because of the universal truth of impermanence, it's not possible for you to meditate every day at 8 a.m. The teachings of the Buddha share what he did. He meditated morning, midday, and evening, essentially had these anchor points. Because remember, 2,500 years ago, they didn't have watches. They didn't have clocks to keep accurate time of when they were meditating or a specific time to meditate. So if somebody shares with you that you have to meditate every day at 3:30 a.m. or else you're not going to get to enlightenment, this isn't true. The Buddha didn't do that. He meditated morning, midday, and evening. And that's what I would suggest for you, is just to have these anchor points where you've set up that in the morning you're going to meditate, in the evening you're going to meditate, and you're going to potentially work to get a midday meditation as well. And you'll need to create more and more space in your life for this to occur. You're not going to be able to just snap your fingers and jump into a 2 or 3 sessions per day, 30 minutes or more. It's going to take you time to build up to that. And as you're building up to that 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more, one of the things that you will notice is that frequency is more important than the amount of time that you meditate. So if you have the option of meditating once for 30 minutes a day and 30 minutes a session, just for that one session, you'd meditate 30 minutes, or you can meditate for 2 sessions for 15 minutes, I would suggest that you go for the 2 sessions for 15 minutes per session, because that frequency will be more impactful to you than the one for 30 minutes. Because if you miss that one session, it's going to be 48 hours before you potentially meditate again. It's going to take you that amount of time. Whereas if you have kind of the idea where you have these anchor points of morning and evening, if you miss one, you've got another one coming up in about 10 or 12 hours or so, or maybe 6 or 8 hours. So look to develop that 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more, and understand that you need to gradually build up to that. And you're not in a competition with anybody. This is your practice. So you need to just work your way towards that and just gradually work in that direction. There's no set amount of time that you're required to get to that. It could take you 6 months. It could take you a year. It could take you longer. Again, you're not in competition with anybody. It's your practice. So build up your practice slowly but surely, and don't be so fixed or craving permanence that you should have one set time or one set amount of time that you're meditating. Your meditation practice is impermanent, and you would like to have these anchor points that you're gradually building up to 2 or 3 sessions for 30 minutes or more. As you're meditating, you might notice that there's some sleepiness that occurs during meditation, particularly as you first start getting started. For the first 3 months or 6 months, you might notice that as you're meditating, you get very sleepy. And this is occurring for a number of reasons. Of course, there's pollution in the mind, and a lot of it as you first get started. So when you're meditating early on, the mind is doing a lot more work to meditate. So it's easy for the mind to become sleepy as you first get started, because there's so much pollution that the mind is having to work through. The other reason why the mind becomes sleepy is because you may not be sleeping well. You might not be getting good quality sleep because the mind is polluted and you have certain cravings that are in there. The mind might be overactive when it's time to go to sleep. And you might have been finding before you got on this path that you were having challenges getting a good night's sleep. And now that you're starting to meditate and clear out some of this pollution, the mind might have a tendency to be interested to sleep, and it might sleep more easily and get better quality sleep now that you're actually starting to train your mind and uproot some of this pollution. So if you notice that there's sleepiness during meditation, you have a couple of options. The first thing is that you could just go to sleep, right? Just get the sleep. Even if you've been meditating for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, even though you plan to meditate for 20 or 30 minutes, just get some sleep, because the mind needs some sleep. The body needs some sleep. The other option is you can change positions. You can move from a seated to a standing to a walking or something else, and this will help elongate your meditation sessions. Because if you're regularly falling asleep in meditation, or you're regularly cutting off your meditation short after just 5 or 10 minutes, you would like to be sure that you're getting some good quality meditation. So when I first started, there were times where I would start meditation, and with 5 minutes I would just be utterly exhausted and tired, and I would just go to sleep. And then I would wake up sometimes 30 minutes later, an hour or two later, and I would go right back into meditation and start meditating again. So even though 2 or 3 per day is what I was working towards for 30 minutes or more, there were some days where I would meditate 5 or 6 times, because in some cases it was only like a 5 or 10 minute meditation. So you still would like to be sure that you get your sessions in. So you might decide that you'd like to move from a seated or lying position where you're tending to fall asleep to maybe like a standing or a walking, and this will help take care of the sleepiness. And then eventually, as you get over that hump 3 to 6 months into your practice, and you're getting more and more of that pollution out of your mind, you'll notice that your mind won't be so sleepy in meditation, because you've uprooted a lot of the pollution, and you're not going to have a tendency to be sleeping so much during meditation, because at nighttime you're going to be getting good quality sleep. And you can also move your meditation sessions around at different times during the day and see how that might affect it as well. As you're meditating, you might notice physical sensations during the meditation, like certain itches or certain tingling or something like this in the body as you're meditating. If this occurs, this is normal. All of this stuff is impermanent, just like the sleepiness is impermanent in your meditation practice. So where you're noticing physical sensations, you might have an urge to hurry up and scratch or itch that. And if you need to do that, go ahead and do that. But what you would like to do is gain more and more control and more discipline of the mind, where you can stay focused on the breath. And when that itch arises, that you know that it's impermanent, that it's going to arise, it's going to change, and it's going to fade away. So as you're in meditation and you're focused on the breath, and you notice an itch on your leg or your arm or your shoulder or something like that, just remain focused on the breath, continuing to focus on the breath. And if you're 5 seconds in or 8 seconds in and gosh, you just gotta scratch that itch, then go ahead and scratch it. But now the next time that an itch arises, try to elongate that. Try to make it 10 seconds or 12 seconds or 15 seconds, and get to the point where an itch can arise and you know that there's an itch there, but the mind is disciplined enough to stay in meditation, stay focused on the breath. And then you can see this itch arise, you can see it change, and you can see it gradually fade away as part of your practice. And the entire time you can stay disciplined and keep the mind controlled to focus on the breath. And this is really good training for you. So these physical sensations are going to occur, and what you would like to do is just elongate the amount of time before you actually itch, getting to the point where you don't need to itch, that you can just allow that itch to take its full life cycle and your mind is unaffected by it. You might also notice visual stimulation during meditation. This is where you might see white lights or green lights or purple lights. You might see flashing lights. You might have memories of past events and things that happened in your past. They might bubble up to the surface, and you kind of can see these happening as part of your meditation. This is all completely normal. The eye itself is just a lens that draws in light. The sight is actually occurring inside the brain. So when your eyes are closed, you can actually still see things because sight is occurring inside the brain. So as you see white lights, green lights, purple lights, flashing lights, you have memories and all this kind of stuff, it's completely normal. It's part of what happens. You don't need to go out and try to investigate, does it mean I'm special that these green lights were flashing? Or does that mean I'm going to get rich because I saw green colors in my meditation? That's not what it means at all. What it means is that you're actually working in a helpful direction, that there's being some physical changes that are happening in the brain. Because what we're doing is we're training the mind. but there's a connection between the mind and the brain. And scientists can see that as you develop your meditation practice more and more, there's physical changes that are happening to the brain. They can see this through MRIs, CAT scans, and other devices. There's doctors, scientists, and researchers who research the brain and the effects that meditation has on the brain. As you're training your mind, what effects does it have to the brain? And what they're observing is they're confirming the same things that the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago, that as you develop your practice to a certain point, you'll get to a point where there's been physical changes that have happened to the brain, and the brain will not regress or change back to the way that it is in the past, that these changes that are occurring to the brain are actually helpful to the brain. It's healthy for the brain to have these different changes. So not only do these changes occur and you can have this visual stimulation because of this, and this is a really good thing, but sometimes you might even hear the changes in the brain. You can hear like the brain is actually changing as you're in meditation. For a very long time in my life, I used to have a lot of pressure in the head and in the skull. And as you train in meditation and the brain is making these physical changes, that pressure may reduce or be eliminated entirely as part of your training in the changes that are happening to the brain. So this is all completely normal. There's nothing wrong if these things are occurring. It's actually an indication that things are moving in a very good direction. And it's important not to get pleasant feelings when you're observing these changes or when you're observing these colors of green and purple and white lights and things like this. If when you see these colors and visual stimulation in your meditation, if you allow the mind to take on these pleasant feelings and you get conditioned pleasant feelings, these lights and this visual stimulation is not permanent. So now when you no longer experience those visualizations anymore, you're going to feel painful feelings. If you base your inner feelings on the condition that you have these visual stimulation, well, when those things change and they no longer exist, you'll experience painful feelings. So when these things are occurring, just remain unaffected. Continue to come back to the breath and keep focusing on the breath. Okay, there's white light, there's green light, there's purple light, there's memories or what have you that are coming. You might hear the brain changing. You might feel the pressure releasing. You might even feel like your head becomes the size of an elephant. Some people talk about feeling like their head is expanding. Some people even talk about being able to view their body as if the mind is separated from the body and they're looking down on the body and they're watching themselves while they're actually meditating. All of these things and others can occur, but they're not permanent. So as they're occurring, just remain unaffected by them. Know that they're normal. And then over time, as all these changes to the brain take place, you won't experience those visualizations anymore. Those will be gone out of your meditation. So that's why you're not interested in clinging to them or thinking that you're special or allowing the ego to come in thinking you're special and things like that. Then you might be meditating with certain external stimulus. If you've been meditating before you learned with me, you might be using beads or candles or incense or music or certain scents that you put in the air and different things like this. If this is the case, I encourage you to strip all those things out of your practice, because you should only need 3 things to meditate: the body, the mind, and the breath. And you'll have these 3 things with you all the time. No matter where you are in the world, you'll have the body, the mind, and the breath. And that's the type of meditation practice that you would like to develop. Whereas if you have this special candle or special incense or music or a phone app or special beads that you have to have in order to meditate, this is the mind being attached to those things, and you're not going to always have them with you. And as you move about the world, you're going to have certain emotions and certain mental states that are coming up in the mind, and you might need to meditate on short notice. You might be at work and you need to meditate, or you might be on holiday in Thailand. Maybe you might be trekking in the mountains of Chiang Mai and you're 3 days away from civilization and you need to be meditating regularly. So if you have this special gong or this special music or a special incense that you can only meditate with these things, then your meditation practice is dependent on these things. The mind is attached to these things. So you would like to develop your practice where all you need is the body, the mind, and the breath, because you'll have these things with you at all times until your last breath. And by developing your practice this way, that then if you're walking in a park somewhere, no matter where you are in the world, if you're like, this is pretty nice here, I'd like to sit down and meditate, you'll be able to do that because you don't need a special cushion or a special blanket or a special mat or something like that. You've just developed your practice to be the body, the mind, and the breath. In this way, your mind is able to meditate in any and all situations. And this will really help you to develop your practice and be able to meditate at any time, anywhere. So let me pause here and see if you guys have any questions on the things that I just shared. Remember, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand electronically in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
There are no questions at the moment, sir.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next set of things that I'm going to share with you guys, which is helping you see some of the words of the Buddha related to meditation. In this book series, there's an entire book devoted to the consolidated teachings of the Buddha on breathing mindfulness meditation. This is volume 7 of the book series, where I've consolidated the most important teachings of the Buddha based on meditation. But here in this class, I'm bringing in just one of those teachings at this point, and there's going to be some others as well that we use the words of the Buddha in today's class. But here I'm going to use this particular teaching to help you see the 4 types of meditation that the Buddha used during his lifetime and encourage you to also learn these same things, because what I'm going to share with you is 4 different meditations and helping you to understand in what situations you would use these and how they're beneficial. But here, before I start teaching those to you, you can have the words of the Buddha to see why I teach these 4 different meditations. Here in this discourse, the Buddha was talking prior to this about different things, and he was describing certain things that you need to develop in your practice. And I have that content in other parts of this book series. Even in volume 1, I have the entire discourse where it shows what he was talking about prior to this. But now here he's going to talk about these 4 things that should be developed. So here he says, having based himself on these 5 things, which he's talking about these 5 things previous to this, the monk or the student should develop further another 4 things. And here's the 4 things that he says you should develop. Develop the perception of unattractiveness of the body should be developed to abandon lust. Lust is like sexual cravings. 2, loving kindness should be developed to abandon ill will. That's that anger, hatred, ill will as part of the 3 poisons, and it's also one of the fetters. Mindfulness of breathing should be developed to cut off thoughts. This is the breathing mindfulness meditation to train the mind to be disciplined, and you can control the mind to be able to cut off the discontentedness as it's arising. 4th, the perception of impermanence should be developed to eradicate the conceit, I am. When one perceives impermanence, the perception of non-self is stabilized. One who perceives non-self eradicates the conceit, I am, which is nibbana or enlightenment in this very life. So this is a meditation to realize impermanence, to realize non-self, and to eradicate the conceit. This is part of the ego, the personal existence view, which is a certain fetter that's in the mind, a certain pollution or taint. And one of the other pollutions is called conceit. We're going to be going into detail on this in chapter 16 of this program and of this book, where I'm going to be sharing with you personal existence view and conceit in detail to help you understand what they are and how to eradicate them. But here, when we talk about meditations, there's one specific meditation that can help you to realize non-self. And if you remember back to the universal truth of non-self, I shared what that was, but we're going to go into a lot more detail in chapter 16 and helping you understand the problem of personal existence view and the universal truth of non-self. But here I'm going to share with you a meditation that can help you to achieve the realization of non-self. And then in chapter 16, there's other teachings that will help you to realize non-self as well. So here's the 4 types of meditation in their order of importance and what you're actually eliminating and what you're cultivating in your meditation practice. The first one is breathing mindfulness meditation. This is the primary form of meditation that the Buddha taught. And you'll see his words in a moment where he taught this as the primary form of meditation that it used in order to get to enlightenment. Now, in order to get to enlightenment, you would need much more than just meditation. You need all the various factors of the Eightfold Path. Meditation is just one component of your entire life practice. But out of all the meditations, this is the primary form that the Buddha taught, because it addresses the primary problem. Because remember, this journey to enlightenment is to get to this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy, where you've eliminated discontentedness. And the cause of discontentedness is craving, desire, attachment. And what you're doing is you're working to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So breathing mindfulness meditation is a primary form of meditation that the Buddha used and that he taught, because it addresses the primary problem, which is the cause of discontentedness, craving, desire, attachment. And you're going to need other things besides meditation. We talked about generosity last week. And then next week and the week beyond that, I'm going to be sharing with you some other teachings of skills and abilities above and beyond meditation that you'll need in order to identify your attachments and actually eliminate them. So what breathing mindfulness meditation is doing is helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, so that when the mind moves off the breath, you can cut that off and bring it back. The mind isn't content in the present moment, so it may be longing or yearning and having different thoughts, and where you're observing that, you cut that off and pull it back, so that now in daily life you have more discipline and more control of the mind. And where you're observing this and observing the cravings is through cultivating mindfulness or awareness of mind, and by cultivating the concentration or singleness of mind. So in meditation, when you're focused on the breath, you're developing the concentration and you're developing the awareness or the awareness of mind, so that when the mind moves off the breath, you can observe that readily with your mindfulness and then cut it off and let it go and bring the mind back to the breath. And this becomes very helpful for you in daily life, that where you observe the frustration or the anger or other things like that arising in your daily life, if you've been exercising the mind in meditation, now you can observe the anger starting to arise, or the frustration or the guilt or the shame or the fear or the boredom or loneliness or shyness or resentment and jealousy. All of these discontent feelings and others, you'll be able to observe that with your mindfulness, that it's starting to arise. And if you've been training your mind with this meditation, you should be able to cut that off, let it go, and bring the mind back to the breath. And that's something that you develop gradually, slowly but surely, over the course of developing your meditation practice. Then there's loving kindness meditation. This is the second most important meditation, and the Buddha referred to it this way as the second highest quality meditation that you could be doing. And he described breathing mindfulness meditation as the first highest quality that you could actually be developing. Loving kindness meditation is addressing that other poison that's in the mind. With breathing mindfulness meditation addressing craving, loving kindness meditation is addressing the anger, hatred, ill will, and all those lesser versions like frustration, irritation, annoyance, and things like that. So as you're cultivating your mind with loving kindness meditation, you're developing loving kindness for all beings, and you're eliminating anger, hatred, and ill will, and all those lesser versions. What loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing others be well, seeing all beings be well, that you have this active goodwill. So you're essentially rewiring the mind in meditation to no longer go down this path of anger, hatred, ill will, and instead go down this path of loving kindness, where you have this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. And now through your intention, speech, and actions, you're able to actually do that. So we're going to talk about both of these today to be sure that you understand what they are and how to practice them, because they address two of the three primary problems. So craving, anger, and ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality, are the three primary problems that the Buddha discovered in the mind. And then there's the 10 fetters, which is a more detailed description of those pollutions or defilements. So breathing mindfulness meditation is addressing craving. Loving kindness meditation is addressing the anger, the hatred, ill will, and those lesser versions. And then the ignorance or unknowing of true reality is being addressed by you cultivating wisdom. By you not believing any of the teachings, you learn, reflect, and practice, and now you cultivate cultivate this wisdom about the natural laws of existence and how the mind functions. And now as you implement this training, you will know the truth for yourself of what's working and what's not working, because you'll see as you are learning these teachings that you can independently verify them. And then when you move them into practice and your mind becomes more and more peaceful, more calm, more content, more joyful, you'll know the truth for yourself and you'll have cultivated wisdom. Then there's these other two meditations that are used in specialized situations. Not everybody's going to need these other two, but where you need them, you can reach out to your teacher and get help and get guidance to learn them. There's the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings. So perhaps if you had multiple partners at one time, and you learn in these teachings through the 5 precepts that it's best to just have one sexual partner, and that's going to produce the best gamma for you, that perhaps you would like to reduce your sexual cravings, and you can use this meditation to reduce your sexual cravings. Or as you get further along on the path to enlightenment, if you decide you would like to eliminate your sexual cravings, you can also use this meditation for that, because you're eliminating this central desire or sexual cravings. And what you're doing is you're cultivating what's called the unattractiveness of the body. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. And then there's this meditation to realize non-self. This is to help you eliminate the pollution or fetter of personal existence view, eliminating the concept that there is a self here, so that you can now realize non-self through understanding impermanence and eradicating conceit, so that now you can realize that there is no self, and now your mind can reside more peaceful and more joyful, because your mind's not going to be shaken up when somebody says something agreeable or disagreeable about your self-image or your self-identity. As long as your mind's clinging to a self, then when you hear agreeable or disagreeable things about your self-image or your self-identity, your mind will be shaken up. So you'll need to realize non-self, and this particular meditation is helpful for you to accomplish that. So here's some words of the Buddha about breathing mindfulness meditation, so you can see where he was talking about it and how important it is for your practice. But the first thing I have here is just a little saying or a little quote that he shares in his teachings, where he says, "A pot without a stand is easy to tip over." The pot is your mind, and the stand is your meditation practice. So what he's saying here is that your mind is easy to tip over if you don't have a meditation practice. A pot without a stand is easy to tip over. So the more you develop your meditation practice, that stand gets wider and wider and wider, and it becomes harder and harder for your mind to become discontent and get tipped over. So as you're developing your practice, you should think of it that way, that the practice of meditation, the benefits are accumulating over time. That when you do meditation the very first time, you might see some certain benefits, but they're not going to be so lasting. But as you accumulate the benefits over weeks and months and years, you will see that as you have a tendency to meditate regularly and consistently, you'll have accumulated more and more benefits. It's kind of like if you had an empty bucket and you were scooping water into this bucket. As you scoop water, it will accumulate more and more water. And the same thing, as you meditate, you're going to be accumulating more and more benefits as you go forward in your practice. These are some words of the Buddha where he's pointing to breathing mindfulness meditation and explaining to you how important it is in order to get to enlightenment in this peaceful mental state. I will read it to you so that you can understand it. He says, "Monks, there is one thing that when developed and cultivated leads exclusively to liberation, to freedom from strong feelings, to elimination, to peace, to direct knowledge or experience, to enlightenment, to nibbana. What is that one thing? Mindfulness of breathing, or breathing mindfulness meditation. That is that one thing that when developed and cultivated leads exclusively to liberation, to freedom from strong feelings, to elimination, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana." So the Buddha here isn't saying that you only need one thing in order to get to enlightenment, because otherwise he would have just taught that and that's it. He taught an entire path to enlightenment of what you're really going to need in order to get to enlightenment. But instead, he's pointing to breathing mindfulness meditation as being a very high priority. And he has other teachings as well that he says in different ways, and he points to breathing mindfulness meditation in different ways. And he's pointing to breathing mindfulness meditation and helping you to understand that this is that one thing that is going to lead to enlightenment. It's kind of like if you were to say, this mobile phone leads to communication. That's what it leads to, is it leads to communication. But of course, there's a lot more that needs to go into communication than just having a mobile phone. You need to have certain thoughts, you need to vocalize, you might need to learn how to use this mobile phone and typing things out. But this mobile phone leads to one thing, which is communication. Right? So it's the same thing with this breathing mindfulness meditation, that this is that one thing that it will lead to liberation, that the exclusive purpose of breathing mindfulness meditation is to lead you to enlightenment. You'll need this and you'll need other things as well. So now, understanding how important breathing mindfulness meditation is to your practice, let's be sure that you understand how to actually meditate so that you can be doing this regularly and build up your practice to 2 or 3 sessions per day. And then I will pause for questions and see what questions you guys have to ensure that you have what you need to be practicing this regularly. What you would like to do is get into a meditation position, either seated, lying, standing, or walking, and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just establishing the breath. And then you would like to focus the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath or the sensation of the air moving into the nose. The breath is the present moment. So you would like to fixate the mind on the breath and know that you're focused on the breath. Then, as thoughts arise and you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, you would like to cut them off and let them go. Just like you saw the Buddha instructed in his guidance in one of those teachings that I shared with you, is that you would like to cut off the thoughts and bring the mind back to the breath. You don't need to observe the thought, label the thought, judge it, analyze it, try to figure out where it's coming from. Wherever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, you just cut that off and bring the mind back to the breath. You'll get better and better at noticing that the mind has moved off the breath and that it's time to bring the mind back to the breath. When you first start, the mind has a tendency to indulge in that thought and follow it for several minutes perhaps, and then realize, oh yeah, that's right, I'm meditating. Let me bring the mind back to the breath. But more and more, you would like to shrink down that time where you're catching the mind sooner and sooner, and you're more easily bringing the mind back to the breath. So as you're arising this mindfulness and concentration in your breathing mindfulness meditation, about 10 times, 20 times, 100 times during your meditation, you're training the mind to let go, let go, let go, let go. Because that primary problem that the mind has is that craving or that clinging, where the mind is holding on to things. And this is what's causing the anger and frustration and other things to arise. So in meditation, you're training the mind to easily let go, so that then in daily life, you're able to easily let go. So your goal in this meditation is not to eliminate the thoughts, but to train the mind to easily let them go, so that now you can use that in daily life. It's just like a professional athlete, that they're going to exercise in a certain way. So say there's a professional pole vaulter. They're going to be doing some agility training, some weightlifting. They're going to be doing cardiovascular training. They're going to be doing all kinds of different training. But then when they perform their sport, they're going to be doing pole vaulting. So the same thing for you is that when you're training in meditation, this breathing mindfulness meditation, you're working to cut off all thoughts. You would like to notice that they've occurred and then cut them off and bring the mind back to the breath. But fully realizing that you will have thoughts. Even when your mind is enlightened, you're going to have an occasional thought in meditation, but there's going to be this stillness and this quietness and peace and joy in the mind, where when you first start, you might get bombarded with thoughts. So as you're meditating and you observe that the mind has moved off the breath, you would like to cut it off and let it go, no matter what kind of thought it is, whether it's wholesome or unwholesome. But then in daily life, as you learned as part of the Eightfold Path, you would like to cut off the unwholesome thoughts. So anytime you're in daily life and you notice an unwholesome thought arise, that's what you cut off and let go. If you have a wholesome thought in daily life, follow that, right? If you'd like to practice some generosity with your family or friends, or you'd like to invite some people out to go do something, or you'd like to pursue a new career or get new training, or you'd like to just sit and relax somewhere and take some relaxation time, allow that wholesome thought to come into the mind, and you support it, you encourage it, you don't allow it to fade. But in daily life, you're only cutting off the unwholesome thoughts. But in meditation, we're training to cut off everything because we're trying to exercise the mind and get it really good at cutting off thoughts. So that's what you're working to do in your meditation, is to arise the mindfulness, arise the concentration, and arise the ability to easily let go of anything that comes up in the mind, so that then you can apply these same qualities in daily life where you have awareness of your mind, you have concentration, and you're easily able to let go of things that arise in the mind. You do this work enough in meditation and in daily life, you'll get to the point where frustration never arises, or guilt and shame and fear never arise, or boredom and loneliness or shyness, jealousy, resentment never arises, because you've eliminated the conditions that are causing those things, namely the craving, desire, attachment. That's what you're working to eliminate in your meditation, is the condition of craving, desire, attachment. And you do that in your meditation, but then you need to stay diligent and dedicated to practicing mindfulness in daily life, so that where you see craving arising, you can restrain the mind and you can pull it back. And that's how you'll get to liberation more and more, where you will no longer experience these strong feelings. So let me see if you guys have any questions here on this particular meditation before we move into the next one. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
Currently no questions, teacher.
Okay, thanks, Iona. So let's talk about loving kindness meditation. Loving kindness meditation is where you're training the mind to eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will. Because as long as you have craving in the mind, in some situations you're going to get what you want and you're going to get pleasant feelings. In other situations, you're not going to get what you want, and the mind's going to experience painful feelings. And one of the things that happens is anger arises in the mind. And when this occurs, what the unenlightened mind typically wants to do is push that person or push the situation away and think that that's going to solve the problem. But it doesn't, because you're just going to get angry about something else. Or you become bitter and harsh, aggressive and hostile in your relationships through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And now that person chooses to leave out of your life. And that's not going to work well either. Or you might put your expectations on this person, where you try to control this person and try to get them to do things your way. And the mind thinks, because of its unknowing of true reality, or its misunderstanding or confusion or this ignorance, it thinks that that solves the problem. Because the mind falsely believes that these discontent feelings are coming from somebody else. So it thinks that if you push them away, or you become bitter and harsh and aggressive, you can fear them into doing things your way. Or you try to put your expectations on the person in order to do things your way. But that doesn't actually solve the problem. The real problem is the craving and this anger that the mind arises in the mind, and it becomes bitter and harsh and aggressive. So when you are experiencing craving, if you get what you want, you get pleasant feelings. But when you don't get what you want and you get those painful feelings, your mind might easily go down this path of anger and hatred and ill will and frustration. And this path, for most of us, is a well-worn path that we experience in the unenlightened state. That the grass has been worn down, the bushes have been pushed back, the stickers have been pushed back. We've gone down this path of anger many, many times. And we know where it actually leads. It leads to broken relationships. It leads to difficulties and struggles in our life. So by being on this path to enlightenment, one of the decisions you're making is, I'm not interested in being that anymore. I'm not interested in being angry and hostile and aggressive, and I would like to transform this. So the meditation is there to essentially rewire the mind. You're forging this new path where you're getting out your machete and you're breaking through the bushes and the branches and the stickers, and you're trying to create this new path of loving kindness, where the mind now has this genuine interest in seeing others be well. You have this active goodwill. And this is why it's quite of a struggle and difficult to go down this new path, because it's not worn. It's not been cleared out yet. You've got to get your machete out and clear out this path and go down this path of loving kindness. And the more and more that you go down this path of loving kindness, this old path of anger, hatred, and ill will gets overgrown. The grass comes back, the branches come back, the stickers come back, and you can eventually get to the point where you've done your meditation and you've practiced in daily life so well that the mind will no longer go down that path of anger. It is impossible for an enlightened mind to go down the path of anger, or even those lesser versions, like even the slightest annoyance. The enlightened mind doesn't experience that because this path has been overgrown, and you've created this new pathway in the mind by rewiring it in meditation to now go down this path of loving kindness. Because in the old days, before you were on this path, when you maybe got angry or frustrated, you blamed somebody else and you felt almost justified in your anger. But now when you start to see with wisdom that your mind is causing its own anger, and now you can skillfully work with this and actually transform the anger and get rid of it, now you employ something like loving kindness meditation to be able to accomplish that. So what you're doing is, in your meditation, out of those 2 or 3 sessions per day, at least one of them should be loving kindness meditation. And you can do more if you like, but at least one of them should be loving kindness meditation. That you first ease in by setting up mindfulness in front of you, however you choose to do that, by chanting or what have you. You start with about 5 or 10 minutes of breathing mindfulness meditation. You then go into loving kindness meditation where you're doing these affirmations, and then you come out of meditation with some more breathing mindfulness meditation and perhaps some more chanting. And in doing this, in that middle section, you're doing these affirmations where you're essentially rewiring the mind. And on the out breath, you're thinking in the mind, may I be peaceful. And you do that on the out breath. And then you breathe in, may I be safe. And then you breathe in, and on the way out again, may I be well. And then may I be free of all discontentedness and the suffering it causes. And then you construct these rings, gradually expanding more and more, where you put individuals into your meditation that you currently have anger, hatred, ill will, frustration, resentment, even the slightest dislike. The enlightened mind doesn't even have the slightest dislike towards any beings whatsoever. So if you have any of those types of feelings in the mind towards any particular beings, you would like to customize a meditation where you're putting them into your meditation practice. So you might need to say, may mom be peaceful, safe, well, free of discontentedness, slowly but surely on the out breath, or dad, or your brother's name, or your sister's name, or your life partner, or your children, your neighbors, your co-workers, anybody and anybody that you are having anger, hatred, ill will towards, or lesser versions. By including them in your meditation, you're working to transform your mind away from anger, hatred, and ill will in those lesser versions. Sometimes people think that loving kindness meditation is to change other people. You're not changing other people in your meditation. That is impossible. If it was possible, we would all get together and we would change other people through our meditation, and there would be no such thing as murders or rapes or prisons or war or any of this kind of stuff, because we could eradicate it from the face of the earth by a bunch of us getting together and meditating and changing other people. But we can't change other people through our meditation. All we can do is change our own mind. So you're training your own mind to have these affirmations, and you're essentially rewiring the mind. I can give you an example of how I did this. I share this commonly, that when I was growing up, I had a lot of resentment towards my mother for things that happened as I was growing up. And as I got into my early adult years, that resentment and anger was still there. So when I first started this meditation, I just focused on, may I be peaceful, safe, well, and free of discontentedness. And then I would put mom in there. And I would do mom sometimes 3, 4, 5 times. And then I would go to all beings. Slowly but surely, over a 6-month period, I wore away the anger and the resentment that I had for mom. It also wore away my negative self-talk, because at one time I had negative self-talk in the mind. So if you have negative self-talk, this meditation is good for that as well. And now when I started talking with mom and I started spending time with mom, I was doing something different. Where in the past, before doing this meditation, I would be bitter, I would be hostile, I would be resentful in our conversations. The slightest little thing that would happen, and I would be hostile with her or aggressive. And then she would be that same way with me because of my karma. What I put out, that was coming back. But slowly but surely, I transformed my mind. And now, when I started talking to her and spending time with her, I could be loving and kind and friendly and polite and respectful. And slowly but surely, as I was doing that, she started observing that she was the one who was being bitter and harsh and aggressive and hostile, and she started to have to change the way that she was functioning. So that over a course of years, we got to a point where there was no hostility between us whatsoever. There was no unkind words, there was no aggression or anything like that. And by the time she died in 2017, everything was completely fine in our relationship, and there was no hostility or aggression whatsoever. But it needs to start with you. It needs to start with your mind. So if you're noticing that your children or your life partner or your parents or your siblings or coworkers, if they tend to be hostile and aggressive with you, if you continue to be hostile and aggressive back, then this is just going to continue on. It's just going to keep going on and on and on and on. But when you train your mind in loving kindness meditation, and then you practice loving kindness in daily life, you can get to the point where you're only putting out loving kindness. And now, slowly but surely, other people realize that they're being hostile and aggressive with you, and they're going to need to do some work to transform that. And now you can actually experience the transformation, and you'll be able to transform your mind and then also transform your relationships. So let's see what questions you guys have on loving kindness meditation. Again, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
There are currently no questions, sir.
Okay, so let's move on to the next meditation, which for those of you guys that might have a little bit of a queasy stomach or you're affected by certain imagery, I'm about to show you a dead corpse on the screen that is dissected and opened up. And this is to help you understand the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings. If this is something that you're not interested in looking at right now, you might decide to blank your screen or something like that. But I'm going to go ahead and change the screen to this image, and then you'll just have to decide for yourself whether this is an appropriate time for you to look at this or not. Because in order to eliminate sexual cravings, there's this specialized meditation that we do in order to develop the unattractiveness of the body. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he did the 32-part body meditation, which he looked at the body and all its individual parts, and he meditated on each individual part of the body. And this helped to train the mind to now see true reality about the body, and then to develop this unattractiveness of the body. But today we use things like images in order to help us to do this, which weren't available during the lifetime of the Buddha. Because the reason why the mind has sexual cravings and is interested in having sex with another being is because we see the outer layer. We see the hair is beautiful, we see the jewelry, we see the clothing, we see the makeup. There might be certain scents that we put onto the body. We see the outer layer of skin. We do all these things to this physical body to make it attractive to other people. Whereas if we really truly saw the true nature of the body, we wouldn't necessarily be attracted to it. So if somebody's skin was ripped off, and it was like, all right, go ahead, have sex, you probably wouldn't be interested in having sex. So what is going on in the mind is we're seeing this outer layer. We're not seeing true reality of the human body. So therefore, this craving arises out of our own interest to please the body and please the mind, to have these pleasant feelings that we then go forward in being interested in having sexual contact. So if you ever get to a point where you're interested in either reducing or eliminating your sexual cravings and you're having challenges with that, what you can do is you can get pictures either on the internet or other places, and you can see dissected corpse, and you can look at this with your eyes open and meditate and just stare at it and develop the unattractiveness of the body, where that you no longer see the body as being attractive. And you can do this to a certain extent, like I mentioned, to reduce your cravings and bring them down to just one partner, where you're having sex with just one partner. Or if you get to a certain point in your practice where you'd like to eliminate sex altogether, you can use this meditation for that. you can make your way to the first and second stage of enlightenment and be able to enjoy a very peaceful and wonderful life. From that first and second stage of enlightenment, you will have significantly reduced your discontentedness, and you will understand the natural laws of existence fairly well, that you will just periodically experience discontentedness, particularly around sex. So as long as you're having sex, there's going to be situations where you can get sex and the body and the mind can get pleased. And there's going to be situations where you want sex, but you can't get it. And in that situation, your mind's going to be discontent. So you could do all the work on the path to enlightenment and continue to have sexual contact with a partner, and your life will be fairly peaceful and fairly joyful. But there's going to be occasions where you want sex and you can't get it, and your mind's going to be discontent. So eventually, at a certain number of years, you might get to the point where you appreciate the peace and the joy much more. You and your partner have done enough sexual contact that you realize that, okay, our relationship is more than just having sex, and you guys might decide to let go of sexual contact. And if you need help with that, this is a meditation that can help you to do that. I explained this in chapter 11, where you just look at the picture and you keep your eyes open during the meditation and you just stare at this picture. You can do this for a consistent period of time. You can even do the 32-part body meditation that the Buddha taught. I don't have that in the book, but if you're ever interested in learning that, you can reach out to me and I will help you to learn how to do the 32-part body meditation. So there's this one, and then I'll share the next one as well before I open up to questions, which is the meditation to realize non-self. Now, in order to realize non-self, you need to first understand the fetter of personal existence view, understanding how that affects your mind and what you experience because of that. Once you understand the fetter of personal existence view, then you need to understand the solution, which is the universal truth of non-self. Then you need to put together your practice of the Eightfold Path with breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, and all those other aspects of the path to enlightenment. And as you do, you're going to start to experience the jhanas, which are these 4 preliminary phases that the mind experiences before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. And I teach classes on what those jhanas are and how to identify that your mind is experiencing those jhanas. As you're starting to experience the jhanas, this is the ideal time to start actively working to eliminate the individual fetters. And one of the first ones that you would like to focus on is personal existence view. Because in order to get into the first stage of enlightenment, you will need to eliminate the first 3 fetters, which is personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. So as you've put together all those other facets of your practice, and you've kind of started to prepare the mind through practicing all the other aspects of the Eightfold Path and other things, then you might get to a point where, having understood personal existence view, having understood the universal truth of non-self, you might end up getting to a point where you decide that you would like to do this meditation to realize non-self. And you'll need to do this multiple times before it really has an effect to wear away this concept or this false belief or this misperception that this body or this mind is you. And it's done in the same style as loving kindness meditation, where you're doing affirmations. On the out breath, you're repeating multiple times, I am not the body. I am not the body. I am not the body. And you repeat this over and over and over in the mind on your out breath. And then you move to the next one. I am not the mind. I am not the mind. I am not the mind. Repeating that over and over. There is no self. There is no self. There is no self. I do not exist. I do not exist. I do not exist. And then, I am not the body. I am not the mind. There is no self. I do not exist. And as you repeat this over and over and over in the mind can start separating and no longer viewing this body or this mind as who you are as a person. There's other teachings besides this meditation, as I mentioned, that you'll need to learn in order to realize non-self, and we'll be discussing those in chapter 16. But this particular meditation can be helpful for you to peel away those layers of the mind that wants to cling to this body and cling to the mind, thinking that this is who you are. There is a body, there is a mind, and these things do exist. and they come together, and we call this the person. But this isn't you. This isn't who you are. So when we say I do not exist, what we're saying is that there is no I. Yes, there is a body. Yes, there is a mind, but there is no I. You can't point to an I. You can't point to a particular thing that says, this is David. Because if I point, this is just a shirt, this is skin, this is bones and fluid and muscles and organs and things like that. None of those things individually are David. But the unenlightened mind will cling to this body and or this mind, the self-image and the self-identity, thinking that this is who you are as a person. And as long as your mind is clinging to these things, when you hear agreeable things or disagreeable things, your mind is going to be shaken up. So if somebody says, wow, David, you look so handsome in those white clothes, it brings out the colors of your eyes. Well, if you hear that and you think that this is you and who you are, your mind might now get conditioned pleasant feelings. You might get happy, excited, elated because somebody's commenting in a positive way about your self-image. But it's only a matter of time before somebody says something degrading and disparaging about this self-image. So if you identify with this as who you are as a person, when you hear those things, you're going to be discontent. Or if you see a wrinkle, or you see a gray hair, or you get a little bit of fat around the stomach or the thighs or the hips, as your body's changing, if you identify with this body as who you are as a person, now your mind can be easily shaken up if you identify with this as who you are as your self-image. And the same thing with the self-identity, that if you cling to this self-identity, like I am an American, or I am a Buddhist teacher, or whatever job you have, that this is who you are as a person, then your mind can really struggle. So if you've ever been a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you guys separated, and then you really struggled with that because part of your identity was that I am a boyfriend or I am a girlfriend, now you might be hurrying up to get back into another relationship to kind of assume that identity again because you feel lost without that identity. Or if you've ever changed jobs or you've ever retired from a job, and if you identified with that job as being who you are as a person, as part of your self-identity, you might have struggled during that time because you felt like a part of you was missing. So what this meditation and all the other teachings on realizing non-self is there to do is to help you to realize non-self, that this body, this self-image, that this mind, this self-identity, it's not you. They exist, but it's not who you are. And these things are going to be constantly changing. So not allowing the mind to cling to this and hold on to it, thinking that this is who you are. So let me see if you guys have questions on the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings or the meditation to realize non-self.
There are currently no questions, teacher, but I have one question myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, do you think it would be possible for someone to experience like negative effects from practicing realization of non-self to the point where they're not necessarily holding on to the sort of middle way anymore, and they don't take care of themselves, they don't live like a healthy life because they don't, they think they don't exist and they don't need to nourish the body, etc.
If the mind has craving and clinging, and it's clinging to this self, thinking that this body or mind is who you are, as you start to let that go, and not just this particular craving, but all cravings, what the mind tends to do is it tends to swing to this other side, which is what you're describing, which is you become indifferent and you don't take care of the body. And that's what you're not interested in doing. That the mind in the unenlightened state, it thinks of things as black and white or right or wrong. And it tends to pursue things out of craving and clinging, selfish desires. So as the mind's starting to let go and realizing that there is no self, if you observe that the mind is swinging to this other side where you tend to not take care of the body and you're not taking care of the mind, that's not realizing non-self. You haven't realized non-self yet. You're starting to let go of craving, desire, attachment, but your mind is swinging to this other side to where you're complacent and indifferent and unmotivated. If you bring that to the middle, then what you realize is that there is a body, there is a mind. These things aren't you, but you still need to take care of it. Because if you don't take care of this body and this mind, then it's not going to be able to serve you well. So you still take showers, you still go to the doctor, you still eat good food, you still might exercise or take vitamins or things like this. That's okay, because you're now pursuing these things as a goal, as an objective or interest. Your mind is let go of thinking that this body or mind is who you are, but you do realize as part of practicing the middle way that you still need to take care of it, that it would be unwise to not take care of this. So if you notice that your mind swings to this other side, bring it back more to the middle where you're taking care of it. And this is the same thing that happens with relationships and other things, that oftentimes as people are craving and clinging to a certain relationship or a certain object or possession, as you're letting that go, because the unenlightened mind tends to be unaware of the middle way, it will tend to swing completely to the other side and push everybody away from you. But that's not the middle way. That's not what you would like to do. So you would like to be able to see this middle way more and more clearly with things like realizing non-self, but others as well, so that as the mind is letting go, you don't allow it to swing really far to the other side, but you can more hone in on the middle and do things that are wise. And in this particular example, it would be wise to care for the body and the mind.
Thank you, teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I've also noticed Joe has his hand raised, so I'll let him ask his question.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
You sure can. Hello, Joe.
All right. Sorry, I'm on site today. My question was, when you're doing these different types of meditations, can you do one without doing the other? Like, should I even be attempting non-self meditation if I'm not doing sexual desire meditation, or does one follow the other, or does one, if you don't do one, you probably shouldn't do the other, because, I don't know if that makes sense. Or should you not do them unless you've reached a certain level of enlightenment?
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. So I wouldn't suggest that you do the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings or the meditation to realize non-self until you've developed a breathing mindfulness meditation practice and a loving kindness meditation practice. Those two need to be developed first and get really well situated with those, kind of like 3 to 6 months of practicing those before you would consider potentially doing these others. And you also need to only be looking at potentially doing the meditation to realize non-self when you're pretty confident that the mind is in those jhanas, because up until then you're actually doing all this work on the Eightfold Path to sort out the Eightfold Path and get that up and running in your life practice. So if you jump into the meditation to realize non-self too quickly, it's not going to really have any effect. It's not going to hurt you. It's just not going to have the full effect as if you developed your other meditations and the other aspects of the practice. The meditation to eliminate sexual cravings and the meditation to realize non-self, these are independent of each other. You don't need to do the meditation for sexual craving in order to do the meditation to realize non-self. But these two, I would say, if you're going to do one or the other, be sure that you have breathing mindfulness and loving kindness already developed before you move into these.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry if you've already said that. I came in kind of late today, but that answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't say that yet, so thank you for that question.
Okay. Great.
There are currently no other questions, teacher.
Okay, so let's continue forward in what I was sharing with you today, which is now just going back to this slide that I showed you already, where just kind of helping you to remember what the 4 different types of meditations are and what you're eliminating and what you're cultivating. This is really important because this is the why. And as you're meditating, you need to know the why. If you didn't know the why and what you're really trying to accomplish in meditation, it wouldn't have the same effect. So be sure that you know the why for each individual meditation and what you're actually actively working to achieve. And if at any point you don't understand the why, that's where you reach out and get help, and I will help you. But this summarizes it for you and helps you to understand the why behind each individual meditation. And then the last thing that I'll share with you before I'll just open up to whatever it is you guys would like to talk about is to never give up. Because as you're meditating and as you're developing your life practice, there's going to be certain struggles and certain difficulties along the way. And the mind will have a tendency to potentially be interested in giving up. And this is an easy thing for the mind to potentially divulge into. But choosing to give up is choosing to go back to anger, go back to frustration, and go back to all these other discontent feelings that plagues the mind. So I encourage you to never, ever, ever, ever give up. And choosing to continue to be dedicated and determined and diligent to walk forward. The Buddha shares the same thing, and here's his words of essentially how he's sharing to not give up. He says, meditate, monks, do not be complacent, lest you regret it later. This is my instruction to you. Because when your mind's angry and frustrated, you will regret having not meditated and having not developed your practice. Because any time that you're struggling or having difficulties in life, it's just because you have certain wisdom that you haven't cultivated yet. That any kind of struggle or any kind of difficulty that you are having in life is just because there's certain wisdoms that aren't on board yet. So if you choose to run away from that and you give up, you're just ensuring that those same struggles and those same difficulties are going to repeat over and over and over and over again. So rather than run away or shrink back from the struggle, that's what the Buddhist shares. He says, don't shrink back from the struggle. And I encourage the same thing. Don't shrink back from this struggle or any difficulties that you have in life. If you need to stop and you need to pause and you need to catch your breath to understand what's going on, if your head's spinning in any particular situation that you're involved in, that's where you reach out to your teacher to get help. But stepping back and taking a breath and then going forward to cultivate wisdom and solve this problem is very different than giving up. Because if you give up, you're going to ensure whatever struggle and difficulty you're having is just going to be repeated over and over and over and over again. So what I encourage you to do is to not shrink back from the struggle, but instead turn around and walk towards it. So wherever you see that the mind is struggling and having difficulties, there's just some wisdom that you need to cultivate that you haven't cultivated yet. And if you walk towards it and you cultivate that wisdom by reaching out to your teacher or other people that can help you, now as you develop that wisdom, you can face whatever struggle or difficulty that you're facing, and then you can overcome it. And then you'll ensure that it's not going to happen again. Because if you cultivate wisdom, then the next time this situation is about to occur, you will spot it miles away, and then you'll be able to implement the wisdom that you learned in order to fix it or resolve it or overcome it. But if you never cultivate that wisdom and you run away, you're not going to see that problem coming, and you're not going to have the wisdom to be able to solve it. So whether it's your meditation practice or any other aspect of life where you see that you're struggling, it's just because there's certain wisdom that you don't have yet. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, your life is completely at ease. There's no more struggles. There's no more difficulties. There's certain challenges that you'll face, but you'll have the wisdom of how to apply that wisdom to that challenge, and you'll be able to overcome it very easily, with ease. But in the unenlightened state, there's going to be certain struggles and difficulties that you face. So just use each one of those opportunities as an opportunity to cultivate wisdom, and now you can overcome that, whether it's in your meditation practice or outside of meditation. So I'll just see if you guys have any remaining questions. It seems like you guys have been pretty quiet the last few classes. Not sure why, but if you have questions, I'll be pleased to answer them for you. If not, that's fine. But I'll just turn things over to see if there's any questions that you guys might have.
No other questions, teacher.
Okay, so I'll just finish today's class by reminding you about, there's Joe's got a question.
Hi, a question on eliminating sexual desire. And obviously, I think you did cover this, but being able to do that in a relationship might be more difficult, if your partner's not practicing. So maybe I just need a reminder. I guess there's only a certain level of enlightenment you might reach, or you just wait until you're, older, and then decide, to do that. So could you save that for last? If, let's say, you had a partner that was never going to practice, which, I'm sure some people have. And that might be something they need to to feel fulfilled in the relationship.
Yeah, exactly. So you can choose to approach eliminating sexual cravings at any point that you like. It doesn't have to be the first thing that you address right out of the gate, because this typically is something that people really enjoy, and they're enjoying it, and they're having a partner, and it does create closeness, and it's an important part of your relationship. So if you're continuing to have sexual contact, that's completely fine. You haven't done anything wrong. Nobody's judging you for that. Nobody's looking down on you, because we've all potentially experienced that in one way or another, and it's an enjoyable part of life. But some people will keep that for certain periods of time and other people won't. And if you have a certain partner who either is on the path or even is not on the path, if you're going to choose to eliminate sexual cravings, it's important that you have a really good discussion with that person, and probably multiple discussions. Because if you just went off and started eliminating sexual cravings and left this person without somebody to have contact with sexually, they're going to probably feel that you're maybe ignoring them, or that you have another person, or they might go out and be with somebody else if they're not getting that fulfillment with you. So if you ever get to a point where you would like to eliminate sexual contact, you would like to have some conversations with your partner, and I can help you understand how to do that and what are some certain ways that you might decide to do that. And then when or if you ever get to that period of time, you can do that. And in the meantime, you can be doing all the other work on the path to enlightenment, because one of the ways to extinguish a craving is, yes, to cut it off and let it go. The way that we're describing is part of this path. But the other part that's part of this path too is to actually fulfill it. So if somebody has really high sexual cravings, one of the ways to eliminate it is to fulfill it, is just have a lot of sex and have plenty of sex. And eventually you'll get to a point in your life where you've been there, you've done that. It's like, how many times can we do that different ways, with things here and things there, and doing it this way and doing it that way? You'll eventually get to the point where, okay, we've had our fill, because the same thing has happened with other things in your life. When we were children, we could not get enough of ice cream. We just enjoyed ice cream, and we just ate it up. Ice cream and candy, right? That's all our life was about, getting ice cream and candy. But we got to a certain point in our life where it's like, you know what? We've had enough ice cream and candy, where now we might still have an occasional ice cream, or we might still have an occasional candy, but it's not like the cravings we had when we were children. And we just thought that life was all about eating ice cream and candy. Well, the same thing happens with sex, that we get to a period of time in our life, maybe in our late teens or our 20s or other times, where we just think life is all about sex, and we can't even imagine ever giving up sex. Some of us might even envision being on our deathbed, still having sex. But I can share with you that if you've had those thoughts, that it's just like the ice cream, that eventually you've had enough ice cream, you've tasted enough flavors, you've done enough eating of candy and ice cream, that eventually you're like, yeah, I've had enough of that, and I can let that go. And the same thing happens with sex. But you would just like to be sure that your partner is in that same place. And it might take them more time to get to that place than you, because of your training with these teachings. You might notice that your sexual cravings gradually diminish based on eliminating your cravings, where if your partner's not on the path, they're not going to experience those same things. So as they age, I'm sure that they will experience a decrease of their sexual cravings, because there's very few people who are on their deathbed still having sex. So as that is occurring in your life, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, whatever it is, you guys will most likely get to a point where you're ready to let this go. And if you need to have some conversations in order to ensure that your partner's in a good place, that's having loving kindness and compassion for your partner, ensuring that they are feeling comfortable about having let go of sex, and that they understand that you're not going out and being with another partner, and that you view your relationship as being more than just sex. Where at other times in our life, in our younger years, we might have viewed our relationships and valued them and looked at them based on the quality of the sex. but we can get to a point in our practice where we realize that the quality of our relationship isn't based on the type of sex that we're having. And when you get to that point, just be sure that you have some talks and maybe some check-ins with your partner to be sure that they're okay with having gradually decreased and eliminating your sexual contact. But you can do lots of other work before you get to that point, and you will experience this peace and this joy coming into the mind more and more as you get into that first and second stage of enlightenment. And from there, you'll still be able to maintain sexual contact and do all that other work. And then when you're ready, and maybe your partner's ready, then you can move into the other stages of enlightenment by eliminating sexual contact.
Thank you. That answers that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Are there any other questions?
No, there are currently no other questions, teacher. Thank you.
Okay, so next Sunday, we're going to be in chapter 12, which is titled, Craving is the Problem, What is the Solution? And here we're going to go into detail talking about the problem of craving and understanding it more and kind of refreshing your memory from the Four Noble Truths, because then chapter 13, we're going to go into identifying your cravings. Just like you need to develop the skill and the ability to meditate and do other things like practicing right speech and right action and other things, you need to develop this skill and this ability to be able to look inward and discover your cravings and identify what they are. Because your teacher can help you to develop this ability, but I'm not going to be with you all the time. So next week's class is kind of like a bit of a reminder about the Four Noble Truths and understanding craving as the problem and then understanding the solution. But then that sets us up for chapter 13, which is teaching you how to identify your cravings and being able to individually see your cravings and then put plans together to eliminate them. Because meditation and generosity is this generalized training that you're using to generally train the mind to eliminate cravings. But there's other things that you can do besides those to more actively and surgically remove certain cravings in the mind. So we're going to be talking about that between the combination of chapter 12 and 13. And then in chapter 14, we're going to be moving into what's called the Brahma Viharas. And these are 4 healthy mental states that you'll need to cultivate. And they're exact remedies and solutions for specific aspects of the mind that need to be uprooted and eliminated. So the next 3 weeks, the reading is quite minimal, but what we're going to be sharing in class and talking about is very important, because I'm going to be helping you to develop some skills that you're going to need in order to further transform the mind away from this craving, anger, and ignorance. And then, of course, on Wednesdays, we're doing meditation together. So this Wednesday, I'll be doing loving kindness meditation with you as we're rotating on Wednesdays between breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation. And we're just coming together to support, encourage, and motivate each other in our meditation practice. So you're more than welcome to attend that live or listen to the replays, because on those Wednesdays, not only are we meditating together, but I'm opening up to any and all questions that you guys might have related to the path to enlightenment. So you can use that time to get help to any questions that you might have. So thank you all for attending for today's class. I appreciate all your questions and all your dedication and diligence to learning. We'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee khap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.